to live streaming services, meetings. Um, I actually just read a really interesting quote and shared it on Facebook on my timeline. You don't have to leave my. Oh, are you working a live stream? That's my wife. If so, don't answer back. I know it's everywhere. I'm sorry. Well, hopefully it'll all get together. Anyways, I shared this. I want to read this to you. This is by Randy Frazee. If I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I'm sorry. He said this: the experience of authentic community is one of the purposes God intends to be fulfilled by the church. The writings of Scripture lead one to conclude that God intends the church not to be more than one bolt on the wheel of activity in our lives, but the very hub at the center of one's life. The Bible is actually very explicit that Jesus died for the church. And we say, well, he died for everybody. Yes, I'm aware of that. I promise. I know. I am one. And so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Anyway, so I get it. He definitely died for everybody. But the Bible is also explicit. Jesus Christ died for the church. And the Bible does have very explicit instructions for believers to assemble on a regular basis. Not semi-regular, not occasional, a regular, consistent basis. And someone says, well, that's just too much to expect. I understand that objection. I too am lazy. No, I'm grumpy, I'm sorry. But so that's just too much to expect to get together every week. I understand, I really do. But we get together every week for a lot of things, most notably work and things like that. We are consistent with the things that we value. So you say, Pastor, why did you just launch into a diatribe about the importance of the local church? Well, it's basically to complain about the fact that we don't get to do that right now. And you say, well, whose fault is it? Who got COVID? Oh, no, I don't want you to think for a second that it's anybody in particular's fault for getting sick. Be careful not to wind up like the disciples when they were talking to Jesus about the blind guy. No, it's not someone's fault that they get sick unless if they deliberately put themselves in harm's way. So to the person who is sick, we are not mad at you. It could have been anybody. To the people who have to stay home, I am thankful for your patience, and I'm thankful for your long suffering. As you may remember from our times together live streaming in March and April, I do tend to teach much shorter lessons when I'm live streaming because you all don't egg me on like you do in person to continue going. No, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's pretty much just you and me, camera, and I am going to try my best to communicate truth to you in a concise way, but in a thorough and impactful way as well. Just before I begin, I'd like to give a shout out to my church family and say, to encourage you. Live streaming is hard. Not for me, this is easy. It's difficult to teach to a camera, don't get me wrong, but paying attention to a live stream is very difficult. It is. I remember when I was away on vacation, and Pastor Kevin, you were teaching in my absence. We were in a hotel room. There were very little distraction. We had a couple of kids, were talking and stuff. I just couldn't tune in. It's just so different than being here in person. A lot of churches have compensated for this in the following two ways. One, more attention-grabbing visuals, right? I don't have those. I have my little name tag, as you can see on your screen. That's about as visual as we can get here. The second is through appealing, concise, pithy, quotable messages of hope and encouragement. I can do those too. There is a champion within you, all right? You are packed full of authority and power, so claim victory over. Listen, I'm not able to manipulate people's attention and say, just listen to me, just listen to me. Try as I might, it is difficult to listen to somebody trying to teach the Word of God on a screen. People say, well, will it ever get easier as we humans evolve and adapt and grow? I don't think it will. I don't think it's supposed to. I think that people communicate best face-to-face. And even though, ironically, digital communication is called FaceTime, it's not quite FaceTime. So that's my encouragement to you, is I come to you without sword or shield, so to speak, like David. I come to you without the visual enhancements. I come to you without the short, packed, powerful aphorisms that, you know, fill Facebook feeds. I just want to teach you from the Bible, just like Pastor Kevin did for about a half hour or so earlier. Just basic, regular meat and potatoes stuff. And that's what I believe the mission of the church is. If we're going to have a special week of preaching, we can highlight certain topics. If we want to have a time where we just emphasize certain thoughts and get really excited, that's great. But on a regular week-to-week basis, my mission is to go through the Gospel according to Matthew with you and to try to teach you to the best of my ability what's in this account. So, with that in mind, let's turn to Matthew chapter 9, if you would please. Matthew chapter 9. And I said this already once, but I'll say it again. I appreciate your faithfulness to watch a live stream. And I would, while we're turning, I just encourage you, if you say, Pastor, I still want to be involved, I don't want to drift away, I can come visit you. I work 40 hours a week, just like anybody else. That is only 40 hours a week. There's 168 hours in the week. I'll find time to come visit if you reach out. I have heard more than once, and if you're listening to the I've heard more than once, Pastor, I feel like you don't reach out, or we don't. One of the biggest things that any pastor I think has on his heart is, I can't read your mind. I don't know when you need a visit. I'm trying to keep everybody in the loop. I'm trying to reach out. Certain things slip through my fingers. Certain things slip from my vision. And if you want me to come visit you, let me know, and I will. If you say, hey, I just need a call or a text, reach out. Whatever you need, anything at all, I will try my very best. And if you say, I want to get involved, I want to still worship the Lord in giving, we have an online giving platform where you can come in during the week and just put a check or whatever, just somewhere in the building, hide it and let us know where it is. Whatever. The doors are unlocked. So I just wanted to give you that information as well. All right, Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9. Last week, we covered what has really ended up being one of my absolute favorite passages in the Gospel of Matthew is where Jesus calls Matthew to follow him. And remember, Matthew is essentially first century mafia. And Jesus says, follow me, follow me. And Matthew follows Jesus. Matthew recognizes Jesus' authority and says, I will follow you. And then he sits down to eat with Jesus, and they're having a dinner party. They're enjoying life. They're enjoying life. And it has been said, and it is true, that one of the only emotions you see Jesus not show is laughter. I understand. However, I don't think that concept was entirely foreign to him, because they had a great time. They did. In fact, based on his response to the disciples of John, it would appear that they were doing the opposite of mourning. They were probably celebrating, and I don't know what you do in celebrating except singing and dancing and laughing and just having a blast. So there they were, eating good food, drinking wine, and just having an absolutely awesome time. And of course, the Pharisees, right? They came up and they said, oh, come on, man, why are you eating with publicans and sinners? I love how they say publicans. How many publicans were there? I mean, I just count Matthew. There might have been others, but isn't it interesting how we tend to pluralize things to make a bigger problem of it than there is? We always do that. It just happens. We pluralize it, Well, man, I have mortgages. No, you have one mortgage. Calm down. I'm just throwing it out there. And sinners, And of course, by this, they meant people who continued in their sin. They didn't know that Matthew had apparently repented, that these prostitutes had repented and come to Jesus and were moving toward Jesus in the centered set, right? They didn't know. They just assumed, you see. So, Jesus says, you need to go and learn what this means, which is crazy because these guys were supposed to be the ones who already knew what the Bible meant, you see. And he quoted the Bible to them, the Jewish scriptures. Then the disciples of John came and said, hey, man, Jesus, we were taught to take this whole thing a bit more seriously. And Jesus said, there's times for that, but right now we're having a great time, and you are invited to the party. But from what I understand, they weren't too eager to join the party. They wanted to combine the new wine in old bottles, right? The new patch on old clothes, And Jesus said, those things are not compatible. You have to leave those religious traditions and come to find hope in me alone. I am life. I am the temple. I am healing. I am authority. Everything that he was claiming to be, he was drawing people away from what they had previously put their hope in, the established religious set, and find their hope in Jesus Christ. And I wrote here in my notes, last week we learned about the difference between a bounded Christianity and a centered Christianity. Thankfully, fortuitously, providentially, I used a black background with white text last week, and so if you would like to see that lesson, it is just before this on the timeline. You got my lesson, Pastor Kevin's lesson, and then immediately before that should be my morning meeting lesson out of Matthew 9. It'll be message 30 in our series in Matthew, titled Near or Far. So this week, we find Jesus once again working a miracle in the records of Matthew. Let's jump right into the text. Verse 18, while he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a certain ruler and worshipped him, saying, my daughter is even now dead. But come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him, and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Does that sound familiar from when he taught to the man who was carried in from his friends when they broke open the roof? He said, be of good cheer. He said, be of good comfort. He wasn't saying, cheer up, nothing to worry about. He was saying, be consoled. I'm here for you. So, thy faith hath made thee whole, verse 22b, and the woman was made whole from that hour. And when Jesus came into the ruler's house, he saw the minstrels and the people making a noise. Well, what do you mean making a noise? They were mourners. They were grievers. I forget what the exact Jewish number was for custom, but I didn't think you had less than 3 grievers and mourners when someone died. So minstrels, we think of, I don't know, like a happy or even a court jester or something. That's what I think of. That's my mental picture. But these were mourners. And to people making a noise, to people who are wailing. In America, this is not a custom. In Zambia, where I spent my youth, this was a custom. When someone had a funeral, you would even hire mourners. And they would cry out with a loud voice. They may not even know the person, but they would wail and make a noise, mourning for the dead. So this is clearly what's going on here. He said unto them, give place, give me some room. For the maid is not dead, but sleepeth. And they understood completely and gave him credit. No, and they laughed him to scorn. But when the people were put forth, he went in and took her by the hand, and the maid arose. And the fame hereof went abroad into all that land. Lord, I'm asking you to be with me as I try to teach in the most interesting and uncomfortable fashion. I don't like it. I made it super clear I don't like it. It's not natural for me, not in a church setting anyhow. I fail to see how this can be as efficacious as meeting in person. And maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe that's the whole point. But Lord, I'm asking you just to please, Father, grant us a special boon, a blessing particular to our times. You would allow people listening to be altered and changed as a result of hearing a honest, forthright presentation of your word. Line by line, letter by letter, just trying to teach my people. Please sustain us and help us not just to survive this morning, but to thrive. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. So, right from the start, we see that this account actually has 2 healings. to healing. One, we see Jairus' daughter. We don't get the name in this text, but the other two synoptics give us the name. We'll get there in a second. But we do see Jairus' daughter is in need of healing. And then on the way there, Jesus is encountered by this lady who has an issue of blood. And we're going to talk about that as well. These accounts together can be found in all three of the synoptics. What's a synoptic? It's a fancy word. Syn meaning together, S-Y-N, optic meaning to see. The synoptic gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is one of the gospel, but he's often categorized as his own kind of gospel because the other three contain so many parallel accounts and clearly seem to have referenced similar sources and similar accounts and things like that. John was pretty much the wild card of them. He wrote with a very strong agenda, inserted his own commentary, and recounted not as many stories that Matthew, Mark, and Luke recount. He has his own theological mission. It is an entirely reliable gospel. However, he has not counted one of these synoptic gospels because Matthew, Mark, and Luke have so many similarities, and John stands alone as more of a gospel, but also a theological treatise, more obviously than, say, Matthew, Mark, or Luke. So when I say the synoptics, don't be confused. Let's just welcome a new word into our vocabulary that has to do with the Bible. So the other synoptics include this account. In fact, all three synoptics authors include this account exactly as it is. Part 1, Jairus he goes to get Jesus. Part 2, the parentheses, the interruption by the woman with the issue of blood. Part 3, the conclusion of Jairus' daughter's story. They all write it in that exact fashion. Matthew has the fewest details of all three of them, per usual. Mark and Luke record a lot more details. Mark, I think, takes the cake in this one in terms of most details. I didn't study that too much, just remembering from my software program. I can read the Bible, and then I click on one button called Harmony, and it brings up all three of the accounts. And if there's 4, it'll bring up all 4. And it's just so easy to study that way. I love it. That's eSword. It's free. I use other software, but eSword is really great. Anyhow, so why include this story? Why would Matthew include this story? Why would Matthew, Mark, and Luke include it? Because you have to understand, Jesus did so many things while here on earth. Why are some of these stories just so viral that they have taken all of these accounts by storm that they can't be excluded? Why? Well, because it's cool. Well, it is cool, I'll grant you that. Because it's great, it sounds great, it fills us with hope. Well, sure, yeah. I submit to you that it's all of the things that you can imagine. However, I want to find out exactly why these two stories go just like this in all three synoptics. And as you might guess, my conclusion is that Matthew is once again teaching us about authority. You say, come on, Brett, you really milked that cow a couple weeks ago. We liked it. It was a nice eye-opening moment. Good job. Did you come back for more because you think it went so well? No. I don't think Matthew's ever left it. And I hope you'll pardon me, but right from Matthew chapter 8. Well, honestly, if you look, wow, this is huge. I'm just seeing this now, so if this is heresy, you'll have to forgive me, but you see Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is Jesus is teaching. He's teaching with authority, and then you see in Matthew 8 and 9, Jesus is acting with authority. I mean, you see that, Master? I mean, that's there. Jesus teaches with authority and not as the scribes, and then in Matthew 8, what's the first thing? Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. I will. Boom, you're healed. Now again, charlatans and fakers, they're out there all the time. All the time. You could have had this set up. But Jesus is going to great lengths to make sure that you know that this is not something that could possibly be concocted. And the fact that people are marveling. Listen, there have been a lot of people claiming to be the Messiah, and there have been a lot of really elaborate setups all through human history. But Jesus is there, and he's saying, nobody can do this stuff. And then he keeps on accumulating and accelerating and upping his game. So we're on the middle of the waters of the Sea of Galilee, and he's like, boom, the sea is calm. And what is that? Only Yahweh, the Old Testament God, had authority over the wind and the sea. Jesus says that authority is mine too. In fact, I think I could build a really strong case that shows that Jesus' whole mission on earth was to say that he had authority, and we're going to get to one particular kind of authority that he hasn't introduced until today. But culminating in Acts chapter 1 when he looks at verse 8, I believe, when he looks at his disciples and he says, all power, all authority. I'd have to look it up. I believe the word's going to be exousia. Even if it's dunamis, it still has to do with social authority. It's given unto me in heaven and in earth. In heaven and in earth. He had spent his entire life healing people, not just because he felt bad. Jesus is not manipulated by his feelings the way that we are, though he feels them and is influenced by them. He did it with a point, with a mission, which is to say, I have authority over these things. I have authority. In other words, he didn't just come to be the bad guy and condemn. In John chapter 3, we read very clearly that Jesus did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. What do you mean, saved from how bad we feel? No. Saved in that we are put under the kind of authority that can rescue us. Real authority is the only thing that can save us from ourselves. You say, I don't know if I believe that. Look at any child. A child needs authority to survive infancy. If we let children do whatever they want, man, they're going to have a blast, but they're going to impale themselves in 30 minutes. It's just the facts. It's just a fact. People need authority. Authority is salvation. It doesn't come without it. Salvation does not come without the authority of Jesus Christ. I'm not launching into a thing about how people get saved and all that. I'm just saying, if you are a son or a daughter of the King, you have to understand that with it comes authority. You're under authority. And that's not a bad thing. That's an amazing, wonderful thing, because his authority is a merciful, kind, loving, rescuing authority. So, anyhow, none of that's in the notes, but I think it goes pretty well. Because listen, Matthew is once again teaching us about Jesus' authority. I only have 3 pages for you this morning. I don't know what that's going to mean, but let's move to the text. Matthew 9. First, I want you to look at who's reaching out to Jesus. Matthew 9, verse 18. While he spake these things unto them, and there's some interesting, there's an interesting discussion as far as the takeaway of when this took place, etc. Matthew records that while he spake these things unto them, a certain ruler came and worshipped him, saying, my daughter is even now dead. Well, what kind of ruler is this? Well, turn over. Again, I hadn't planned to do this either, but I figured I would. That doesn't make any sense. Turn over to Luke chapter 8, would you? Luke chapter 8. You say, I don't want to turn there, man. That's cool. That's cool. And you might normally use your phone as a Bible, and you might be using it for the live stream. That's cool, too. Luke chapter 8. Yeah, look. Verse 41. And behold, there came a man named Jairus. Now, it might be 3 syllables, if you depend on which. Jairus is fine for us today. And he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and besought him that he would come into his house. For he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay a-dying. Excuse me. But as he went, the people thronged him. And just really quick, we're not going to go here quite yet, but look, and a woman having an issue of blood 12 years. I just thought it was interesting that number 12 there. 12 disciples, daughter's 12 years old, 12 years with an issue of blood. So the title of the lesson this morning is 12 Years of Life and Death, and we'll see what that has for us this morning. But I wanted to show you the Luke passage, and the Markan passage will show you the same thing, I believe, is that Jairus is not just a ruler over a supermarket. He's not just a ruler over some district. He is a ruler of the synagogue. He's one of the head honchos in the den of vipers, so to speak. Who's the good guys in the story? In Jesus' story so far, if you've been reading and you have a fresh mind and you're just reading this for the first time, or you're just reading it with fresh eyes, the good guys in the story are the little guys. They're the rebels. The bad guys in the story are the empire, to use a Star Wars analogy. I think Star Wars analogies actually work really well for the Gospels. I'm sorry, but that's where we live, okay? So the rebels, the little guys, the stinky ones, the ones who live in the alleys, the ones who have to beg for food, the ones who've never been given attention, the ones who've been told that they're subhuman. Jesus said, I came for you, because the people who are sick need a physician. But the ones in the synagogue already thought they had it made in the shade, you see. And so they said, man, we don't need a doctor. We already are right with God, because we are in the temple every day. We are keeping the sacrifices. We have a bloodline. Man, we have it all going for us. Remember what Paul did? I have a feeling that when Paul recited that in one of his letters to the churches, he recited his qualifications. He said, I speak as a fool. And then even once he said, you guys are making me speak like a fool. I think it was to the Corinthians he said that. But he said, I speak as a fool. And then he goes and lists his qualification. I don't think he was making that up. In fact, I think he probably had that memorized as something he used to quote as his qualifications for being as good a Christian as he was, or as good a believer as he was. Does that make sense? So so Paul could easily list his qualifications. I have a feeling like Jairus could easily list his qualifications too. This guy is a ruler of the synagogue. He's one of the ones who already worships God. He's one of the ones who knows God. And probably, given that he's the ruler of the synagogue, he's surrounded by people, and maybe is one himself, who's not entirely sure about this Jesus character. The synagogue was the place that constantly was sending people out to challenge Jesus of Nazareth. Why? Well, come on, it doesn't take a genius to look at Jesus' ministry and find out that he was healing people left and right and saying, hey, go show yourself to the temple and tell them something new's going on. Or when the guy descended through the roof, Jesus said, hey, your sins are forgiven. And the people, the rulers of the synagogue would say, wait a minute, that only happens at the temple. When you go through the rigmarole and you you kill the animal and the blood comes out, and then you have atonement, and then you are forgiven. But Jesus is saying, look, not everybody can come to the temple, but the temple can come to them. And they didn't like that, not one bit, to the point where they eventually killed him for it. They killed him for a few days. Not a permanent win. Well, you might be reading this and you might say, I thought the synagogue rulers were the bad guys. And that's kind of the point. Jesus knows that we're all bad guys, but that anybody, even a synagogue ruler, anybody who is willing to come to Jesus in faith and lay down their arms is no longer a bad guy. You're a son or a daughter. You are accepted by faith. People say, man, Brett, I don't understand how this whole salvation by grace through faith thing works. I know that Luther was talking about faith alone, but then James comes up and says faith and works, and then Paul said faith, but nobody even knows how he meant faith. What is going on? What is going on? That's why I love the Gospels, man. That's why I love the Gospels. Just look at how people came to Jesus. Seriously, 100% seriously, let me help you. Let me lay your fears to rest. Get out of your theology for a second and just watch what happens when people go to Jesus Christ and say, my God, I have an entire life behind me of this, that, and the other, but I don't know anything other than just come to Jesus and say, I can't do anything for myself. I need you to help me. Even in the Old Testament, it has been spoken that God he just can't say no. He's a sucker for a broken heart and a contrite spirit. He loves being that way. I relish in the fact that all my little girls have to do is just look at me. All my kids, especially my girl. All they have to do is look at me. And especially, there's one of them in particular that when she starts crying, I break, it kills me. I'm the worst. My wife sees right through it. And I'm like, Amber, no. This little one, can you not see that she is in torment? But as soon as she gets what she wants, shoop. I fall for it every time, though. I fall for it every time. You want to see something, though, is God, and I'm not trying to mischaracterize God, so please don't just take this soundbite out of context. That's popular. We like to do that. Not we, but we humans, we do that a lot. God falls for you when you come to him and say, God, I've got nothing. Now, again, he sees through crocodile tears, right? He's got wisdom, right? But if you come to Jesus Christ, if you come to God through Jesus and you say, look, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing here. I don't know the words to say. I don't know what things to believe. I don't know anything. That's exactly where he wants you. Just come to Jesus. Like Jairus did. He had probably a lot to sacrifice. I just wrote here, consider that it may have been a real step of humility and faith for Jairus to step away from his religious tradition to move toward Jesus. I like how C.S. Lewis put it, man. Christianity, when you enter into Christianity, it's kind of like you're in the foyer. From there's a lot of faith traditions, denominations, or whatever, and they're different rooms, and you're going to eventually find yourself in one of those rooms. But just coming to Jesus, just stepping in, it doesn't require a creed or confession or denomination. Just move to Jesus. You see, move to Jesus. Jairus moved toward Jesus. That's an important phrase. Early on in the Gospel of Matthew, I learned and hijacked a phrase about the upside down kingdom. I love the phrase. I'm going to keep using it the rest of my life, probably. I hope. Another phrase that I absolutely love is moving toward Jesus. Move toward Jesus. That's it. Well, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know what to do about that. Move toward Jesus. Move toward Jesus. That's what Jairus did. People, oh, listen, this is gonna be a help to some, and it might sting others, but it is true, so we're gonna talk about it. People all around Jairus were probably calling him a compromiser and a neoliberal and whatever else. But it didn't matter to Jairus. Why? Well, Jairus had a reason that was more important than anything else. His reason for going to Jesus, moving toward Jesus alone, stepping away from the religious trappings, his reason was so important that he did not care, in comparison anyways. What was his reason? Oh, he had a daughter that was dying. And when he, listen, oh, by the way, I thought about this, actually I just thought about this pretty recently. How long do you think Jairus waited before he finally humbled himself and went to Jesus? You know what I'm saying? Because by the time Jesus ended up getting to her, she was dead. And he didn't get hung up for that long, I don't think. It's not like he camped out for a day. He was on the way to see her. I can't help but think that, and listen, it may very well be that she was conked on the head by something and got a head injury and he went right away. But I'm just throwing this out there, excuse me, that this young lady is not feeling well. Look, my daughter is even now dead. I'm sorry, she's beyond not feeling well. Yeah, my daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand upon her and she shall live. What is the, I don't want to extrapolate too much on this, but if you look at the, I don't want to try to enter into the mind of someone else in the gospel too much, but look at the scenario and wonder how long it took Jairus to come to Jesus. If he had come to Jesus earlier, do you think it might have been a different scenario? I don't know, but I am saying that Jairus' reason for coming to Jesus outweighed any reason not to move toward Jesus. Now, look at what happens here. My daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand upon her, and she shall live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And, behold, a woman, which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years, came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. In three little verses, and again, in the Mark and Luke accounts, they're different. And in fact, you'll notice some discrepancies. I was just caught up by a discrepancy with Jairus' daughter, the initial state of Jairus' daughter, between the Mark and Lucan descriptions and the Matthew description. See if you can find it. This woman with an issue of blood is covered in three verses in this one. But turn over to Mark, would you please? Mark. It's going to be toward the beginning. You say you don't have this written down? No, I don't have it written down. There it is. All right. Mark chapter 5. Yeah, you know what's interesting? It's right there. That's the discrepancy, by the way. In Mark and Luke, look at what the guy says. He says, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee come and lay thy hands on her that she may be healed and she shall live. You say, well, there's differences in the story. Yeah, there's obviously eyewitness discrepancy. There's no one in the world, no honest scholar will deny this. You can have a bunch of people try to rationalize around why, well, it's actually a translation. No. The fact of the matter is Matthew, look at how long Matthew takes to tell this story. Less than 10 verses. He is truncating. He is shortening the story to make a theological point. This is not deception, especially because you have the Markan account, which by way of chronology, is earlier than Matthew's account. So Matthew knows people have the opportunity to read all the details if they want to. He's writing a particular message with a truncated account. So is the Lucan account. Now that we're in this, I'm just having a good time. I don't care how professional this is. I'm just looking at it with you with fresh eyes. In Luke, there's that one. I appreciate your patience. It is, chapter 8 in Luke. Verse 41, a man named Jairus, he fell down and she lay a-dying. So, in Mark and Luke, you've got Jairus coming to Jesus and saying, hey, listen, she's at the point of death. And then when he's healing this woman, Mark and Luke accounts say that people came to Jairus while he was talking to this woman and said, don't bother the master anymore, she's dead. Matthew's account, Jairus is saying, listen, my daughter is even now dead. Again, Matthew is combining the second piece of information which Jairus received from his followers and the first tidbit of information that Jairus came to Jesus. Again, Matthew is not engaging in the deception. He's in what is called literary truncation, in which he is leaving out the specificities of the story that are not serving to make his point theologically, but he's heightening the points of the story that make his point theologically. So again, he's not cutting out or recrafting or recrafting anything. He's simply reframing the story to make a point. Anyway, sorry, back to the notes. I wanted to get that because that caught me for a loop, but I wanted to throw that. I studied the parallel accounts, but I did not notice that Matthew's account has Jairus saying to Jesus that his daughter is even now dead. That being said, in verse 18, my daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand upon her and she shall live. There is a distinct possibility that Jairus is saying she is as good as dead. There's a number of possibilities there, but I don't want to go down the rationalization trail. Anyhow, excuse me. So while Jesus is on the way, let's stay in the Mark passage. While Jesus is on the way, no, actually I'm going to be in the Luke passage, excuse me. Verse 43 of Luke chapter 8, a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any. Look how Luke talked. Since we've been spending so much time in Matthew, it's so different how Luke talks, right? Came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. And by the way, you'll notice that some of the terminology that Luke uses is unique to Luke, particularly from his apparent expertise as a medical physician. So there's something to consider there as well. And Jesus said, who touched me? Everybody denied. Peter and they that were with him said, Master, what in the world are you doing asking people who touched you? We're in the middle of a big crowd. And Jesus said, somebody touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. Again, Matthew leaves these out. We've already seen he completely shortens the entire story for his audience. But what's going on here? I know that virtue went out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. Go in peace. What a story. What's going on with this woman with the issue of blood? What's happening in her life? What's going on? Well, it seems clear she's suffering from an issue of her womb. An issue of blood is a if I was at the top of my game right now and not just recovering from being sick for a whole week, I know it's a euphemistic, there it is. I thought of the word euphoria. Close, but not nearly the same. It was a euphemistic term to refer to a woman's issue of blood that normally would have to do with a period of menstruation that did not take place during a time of menstruation. The book of Leviticus actually covers this pretty thoroughly. If you've got the time, you can go ahead and cross-reference it. I think it's chapter 25. I might have a cross-reference here in my Bible. It is going to be in Leviticus 15. There it is. Yeah, it's in Leviticus 15, how to handle these sorts of things. And this is not, by the way, due to some lack of pity for this woman. It's because, I remember we just talked about this a few weeks ago, a discussion of ceremonial cleanliness, a discussion of hygienic cleanliness, and the fact of the matter is that this woman had an issue of blood. She was not allowed into the temple. That's very important for you to know this. That for the last 12 years, she was not allowed in the temple. She was not allowed to get married. She could not have children. None of these things were possible for this woman because of this issue of blood. No wonder she spent her fortune trying to get cured of this thing. She was in desperate need of Jesus. Notice that this woman did not care about how she looked. She had this in common with Jairus, didn't she? She didn't care about how she looked. She did not care about what people thought. She'd obviously crossed that line by the time that she saw Jesus and said, he's my only hope. I'm going after him. People might be looking at her and saying, wow, what are you doing out of your house? You stink. You look weird. I don't like you. You're poor. You're sick. You are unclean. But she knew by now that Jesus had a soft spot for the unclean. She knew that if someone was going to save her from herself, from her malady, and someone to give her the reassurance that her soul needed, that she was right with God the Father, she wasn't going to get it from the temple. She was going to get it from Jesus. So she risked it all and chased after him. She came up behind him, touched the hem of his robe, and she was healed. You know the story. Jesus actually asked, who touched me? And when the woman spoke up, what did Jesus call her? Daughter. Daughter. And he assured her of her wholeness. Your faith made you whole. I just wrote here, what an amazing day. 12 years of suffering immediately healed because of one impulsive, crazy, sudden moment of faith. I remember when my children and I went to what they call the IT Adventure course in Portland, down where Jordan's Furniture is, in the main mall. I didn't know this until recently, but it's the largest LED ceiling in the world, in America, I guess, maybe the world. You gotta have a claim to fame at some point. It's the largest LED ceiling. The whole thing is all LED lights. It's like a LED screen, I guess. And it's like zip lines and obstacle course. They have them around here in Maine, a few places, and you can go online and look it up just to kind of get a visual of what I'm talking about. It's called the IT Adventure course, I believe, right in Portland Mall. And I told you this before a few weeks ago. I used it as an illustration. I'm going to milk this for illustrations, but I told you how I stood at the edge of the zip line and I was trying to show my son that he could do it. And I thought, well, first I have to convince myself that I can do it. And I jumped off and I just, oh man, it was uncomfortable, but I did it and I ended up on the other side okay. But all it took, I'm standing there trying to work it up. And maybe you've gone bungee jumping, maybe you've gone skydiving, maybe for you, just leaving the house requires that kind of courage. But all it takes is not just working it up all along, but when you get to that threshold, when you're just about to step over the door, when you're just about the doorway, when you're just about to jump out of the airplane with the parachute, when you're just about to step off the edge with the zip line, there's always that last minute go in your mind. You know what I mean? There's always that last minute step out. That last minute surge that you know that you need. I watched a video recently of a young child. She was on a skateboard. She must have been 8 or 9 years old, maybe a little older. And she's on a skateboard and she's very proficient at skateboarding, particularly for her age. And her father is there and she is on a very high vertical ramp. It's a very, very high vertical ramp. And she's sitting there ready to go, but she just can't muster the courage. And instead of just pushing her, he encouraged her, come on, you can do this, you can do this. And she finally, whatever it was in her, that just clicked. It just happened. The impulse, the thing that says, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. It happened. And she went, shoo, and made it, and just fine, and had a blast. And then once you do it once, it's easier to do it again, isn't it? One last illustration. I remember when we were in Africa, we didn't have a lot of toys per se. We had plenty of toys, but we played outside a lot. And one of the fun things that we did, call us crazy, this was back before you had safety about everything, and it's in a different continent, so that works too. There was a big pile of sand. We would often be building bricks or things like that for our wall fence or for the church, and so we often had just some sort of construction project going on, and in this case, it was a big pile of sand. And my brothers and I would take turns climbing up into my dad's Toyota Hilux. It's a 2-ton truck, very heavy truck, and a very big truck too, just a very, very heavy vehicle. A very tall pickup truck as well. And we had to have it off the ground because we would often pick up about 25 to 30 Zambian people in the back of the pickup truck for van route. So if you're a member of van route, be thankful I don't have a pickup truck, but we have a van. And so we would just drive them to church in a pickup truck. So it was a very big, high off the ground pickup truck. And we would jump off of the edge of the pickup truck. We would stand on the side of the pickup truck there, and we would jump off of the pickup truck and into this pile of sand. And at first it was very challenging for me. I was just a little kid, I'm 8 or 9, and it was scary because it's sand, I'm really high. And once you did it the first time though, it is fun. It is fun. Similarly, this woman has been suffering for 12 years. And she knew that if she did not pursue after Jesus, it wasn't going to happen. Her life, listen saints, would stay the exact same. So she made the decision. It doesn't matter how scared I am. By the way, you know it, courage is not about not being afraid. It's about making the right decision even when you are. You see? Doesn't matter how afraid I am. Doesn't matter what people will think of me. It doesn't even matter if this entire attempt fails. I'm going after Jesus because I believe he's my only hope. And Jesus healed her. Only Jesus can do that, by the way. Only Jesus has the authority to do such things. Notice that in calling her daughter, he was clearly stating that she was right with God. He was healing and forgiving sins. That's what he loved to do and lived to do. So, let's wind our message down as the text winds down as well in Matthew 9. And then we're going to connect these stories. I believe how the intent of the author is to connect them. Verse 23 of Matthew 9. And when Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the minstrels and the people making a noise, he said unto them, Give place, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. Jairus' daughter was dead. And sometimes we hear these resurrection stories in the gospel so often that we forget to allow the impact of the feelings to hit us. Because we read right ahead to when Jesus heals them. And everything's great. Everything's hunky-dory. But no. Please, think about it. You're Jairus. You come and get Jesus. My daughter's dead. My daughter's dying. What have you? Please come and heal my daughter. Jesus stops and heals this unclean woman. Was Jairus' daughter unclean? Not really. Not until she was dead. Death is unclean in Jewish culture. You can't touch something dead, right? Sure. So Jairus' daughter was not unclean. She was born to a very clean Jewish house. This woman was unclean for 12 years. So you've got 12 years of uncleanness and 12 years of cleanness. Which one is Jesus going to prioritize? Surely the 12 years of cleanness. Come on, this is huge. Instead, Jesus says, I'm going to take the time to make sure that this lady who has been unclean for 12 years knows that she's just as important to me as someone who's been clean for 12 years. Then he moves into the house. And he sees them. They're wailing. They're weeping. Jairus is probably crying the loudest of all. His daughter was dead. No longer living. His only daughter, young, dead, cold, never coming back, gone forever. So instead of just turning around and leaving when he hears this news, Jesus continues to move toward the house. What was Jesus thinking? In fact, one of the texts actually lets us know that he only allows Peter, James, and John to follow. He says, Peter, James, John, I want you guys with me on this one. And then, as we see from this text, he clears the house of the wailers and the scoffers, maybe even the parent. Wait, no, I don't know. Look. He enters the house. He tells them that she's just sleeping, which is not a lie, because the Christian hope is that when we die and we pass from this life, this body is sleeping, awaiting the resurrection. And he says, Talitha Kumai. Arise, young maiden. Arise, little girl. I just wrote in my notes, we need to stop for a second and understand that this actually happened. Are you with me? We need to stop for a second and really and understand that this really happened. There's the girl who was lying dead on a bed or a slab, and Jesus walked in and said, she's sleeping, and they go, yeah, right. Come on, man. Whose leg are you trying to pull? We're professional mourners. We've seen this before. And Jesus said, I am not something you've seen before. Clear out. And he walks in and says, little girl, get up. And he takes her by the hand, and she gets up. So what do we learn from all this? What do we learn? In fact, just really quick, in another text, he tells everybody, don't tell anybody what happened. But in the end of our text here in Matthew, verse 26, the fame hereof went abroad into all that land. I mean, you can't help it. Things like this, people talk about. They go viral. So, what do we learn? Well, we learned 2 weeks ago from the text that Jesus has both authority to heal and authority to forgive. Then last week we saw Jesus expound on that in calling out Matthew and eating with sinners and having people understand that he was leading people out of a bound, closed set and saying you can only be a follower of Jesus this way, and instead leading them into a centered set that says all you have to do is move toward Jesus. You don't have to be a clone of all of these other images. All you've got to do is just be you and your messy self and come to Jesus and he will clean you. And then this week, Matthew capitalizes on this principle by showing us that Jesus uses this authority to heal and forgive and restore people to himself by any and all means possible. Not even death could stop Jesus' authoritative mission of restoring all creation to himself. Now, you say, Pastor, I think I understand, but the profundity isn't quite hitting me yet. Well, listen. Are we supposed to learn from this text that when our children or our loved ones die, that all we have to do is just pray real hard and they'll come back? And my brother, he died. My father, everybody kind of expects their parents to go before him. Even though I was pretty young, it's not, not as unnatural. My brother was in his early 30s. And he died. And I say, isn't this the part where I pray? And Jesus heals him? If Jesus brought people back to life then, why wouldn't he do it now? Jesus' mission again and again and again was not just to teach us that the surface level of his miracles was what he wanted us to see. Jesus was trying to teach a deeper, more important principle than just healing people and raising people from the dead. While that is all sensational, while that is all profound, and while it is certainly important, Jesus said, all of these miracles pale in comparison to what I'm really trying to teach you, which is that I have the power to do these things. Jesus said, I have authority over sin. I have authority over sickness. I have authority over death itself. See, the whole point isn't that when our loved ones die, we try to pray them back into this life. No, that's the opposite of Jesus' point. Listen to Jesus' point. When our loved ones die, we surrender them to the power and authority of the only one who's conquered death. That's the point. When our loved ones die, we surrender them to the authority of the only one who's ever conquered death. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want or need or have any time for a Savior who wants me to feel better, who wants me to be able to live again. I need a rescuer who has the authority to make that happen. And whereas this might be old hat to a lot of us. We may say, well, of course Jesus has power over death. You know, the Lazarus story and the Jairus' daughter story and the whole resurrection story. You have to understand that this was new to these people. This is the first resurrection story in Matthew, see. He's running, and people literally said to Jairus, stop bothering Jesus now. He didn't make it quite in time. Your daughter's dead. Count your losses, Jairus. Come on, Big J. Come on back to the house. We're going to have a funeral. It's going to all be said. And Jesus said, no, wait, hold on a second. I think you're underestimating my authority. You believe me that I can heal sicknesses. You believe me that I can forgive sin, but you're drawing the line somewhere, and that's what Jesus was trying to do, is to teach us not to draw the line at any point in his authoritative boundaries. Don't limit Jesus. Not just, and please don't get me wrong, not just his abilities. We all know Jesus can do anything. But the fact that Jesus is showing us that even death is completely under his thumb. And by the way, how did he finally show us that? When he died. The God-man submitted himself to death, and in death defeated death. He had authority over death. So, I'll just put it this way. Someone who has the power to live again is great. Someone who has the power to make others live again is great. But someone who has the authority to defeat death for everyone is better. You see how that works? You see how this text is starting to present that? Because we see, oh man, he made this little girl walk again. That's awesome. But the whole point that Jesus is trying to have us understand is that at the hour of our own death, we must become like Jairus, and we must become like this woman with the issue of blood, clean or unclean. Come to Jesus and say, you're my only hope. And the only one that I can go to, that I can trust in the hour of my death, is Jesus Christ. That's not blind comfort. That's not empty words. It would be empty words if it was Buddha. It would be empty words if it was Muhammad. It would be empty words if it was Joseph Smith. It would be empty words if it was Charles T. Russell. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? It would be empty words if it were anybody else. But it's, and by the way, it would be empty words if it were Peter. It'd be empty words if it were Paul. Those guys raised people from the dead too, didn't they? Sure. Peter and John, Silas, sure. But they only had the authority that was given to them by Christ. Christ is the final authority. So, let me just read my closing statements here. Thank you for your patience. In the hour of our own death, we are to become like Jairus and the woman with the issue of blood and say, Jesus, you're my only hope, and embrace death with an imperfect and timid faith in the face of the unknown. I'm not afraid to die. Hey, I'll tell you what, I would just love to be like you. I'm not afraid to die. I don't think that's the right way to put it, but it's unknown. It's unknown. What's the first thing I'm going to see? I don't know. You know? First thing I'm going to see is my Savior's face. That would be great. That's probably what's going to be. I don't know. I don't know. And what if we're wrong about this whole thing? I'm pretty sure we're not, but you know. Death is the great unknown. It's the one factor that nobody can write issues about because they're dead. So what do we need in the hour of our death? Not just a healer. We need somebody who has authority over death. So I just wrote here, Jesus gave life to the woman who could not have children or enter the temple or be married. He healed her. Jesus gave life to Jairus' daughter. Jesus has this kind of power and authority. So, 3 point, and I don't even have any expounders on my point. You can't see this from here, but just very, very bottom of my last page. God in Jesus has moved toward our suffering. God in Jesus has moved toward our uncleanness. And God in Jesus has moved toward our own death. To make sure that when we arrive at these things, He has already been there saying, I have authority over all of these things. So let's move toward Him in faith. Just like Jairus, just like the woman with the issue of blood, and say, I may not understand everything about this. And I may have a lot of unanswered questions. But if there's one character in history that I've learned to trust from watching, from listening, from learning, from seeing, it's Jesus of Nazareth. It's God in the flesh. So whether you're facing sickness, whether you're facing the death of a loved one, or whether you're on your own deathbed, I want you to know that you don't have somebody to trust in who gives you empty promises. I'll close with this illustration. No notes, no Bible. Truly closing with this illustration. Thanks for your patience. I'm kind of making it up on the fly here, but I know what illustration needs to be made. If I was in prison and I was looking at parole or the death penalty, and I was examining my options. And let's say I'm trying to get out of prison. Do I turn to my cellmate and say, will you please parole me? And he could say, yes, you are paroled, you're free to go. Did it have any effect on my life? It might make me feel better. Come on, saints, it might make me feel better, but it won't change my state. How about if I'm facing the death penalty? I look at my cellmate and I say, cellmate, let's name him Jim. Jim, please, won't you spare me? I don't want to die. Please save my life. And Jim says, you know what? You're spared. My cellmate can't do anything. He's in the same place I am. The only one who can save me is the one who has the authority to parole me, the one who has the authority to liberate me from the death penalty. Please understand that anybody can make us feel good. Only Jesus can actually make it happen. You say, man, I've lived my whole life not really worshiping Jesus, just kind of trusting the Great Spirit that He's going to do what's right. And, listen, all of that sounds good, but they don't have any authority to do that. You see, I'm banking my life now and my life hereafter on the one who has the authority to make it happen. So anyways, church, that's my message to you from the Gospel according to Matthew. A little longer than I had anticipated. I only had 3 pages. I've learned by now that whether I have 3 pages or 6, it's going to go right around the same amount of time. Thank you for being patient with me, and I love you earnestly. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. Any messages, Pastor Kevin, that we should remember this week? Okay. And I hope that you'll take that with you this week. Please. Please take that with you this week. And yes, by the way, that does mean that God does have the authority over this coronavirus. And can I draw a parallel for you this week? Well, God has the authority over this coronavirus, and we're going to come together. No. God has authority over death too. Doesn't mean you can't throw yourself in front of a train. Just because God has authority over something doesn't take away our sphere of responsibility within that thing as well. So God does have authority over the coronavirus. God does have authority over everything in this world. So let's appeal to Him and His authority in this life and in the next. And that's really the lesson for today, is knowing that God took time, whether 12 years clean or 12 years unclean, to help and to heal and forgive. Anyways, I hope that was a blessing to you. Clearly teaching it a little different online, but if there's anything I can do for you this week, please let me know. One last announcement. I really want to get the Zoom meetings going for these 2 weeks, especially for these 2 weeks. I would like to do our Wednesday Bible study via Zoom. I think that would be really neat, because I don't want to just talk to you on Wednesday. I want us all to be able to interact and spend some time together. And honestly, it might be a nice stepping stone to include those who live from away. If they're not able to be with us on Wednesday to join the discussion, to be able to Zoom in with us on Wednesday as part of a permanent fixture. It's not the same as being together. It's not supposed to be the same as being together, but Zoom would be a really cool thing to incorporate for our Wednesday night. So it's already been requested by one member, and so I am really going to try to get that going for Wednesday. So please, I'm begging you, please play along if we want to Zoom this Wednesday and next Wednesday. I would really appreciate your participation to be a part of a digital assembly as much as we can for the